As you are probably aware, former Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe was killed with a homemade gun. Japan has some of the strictest gun control laws in the Western world, and yet they didn't stop a madman from killing the former Prime Minister in broad daylight with a homemade gun. The gun appears to have been made with wooden sticks, pipes, explosive powder, tape, and an electrical igniter. Anybody can make one without tools, which is further proof that gun control doesn't stop violence. True, this crude device is nowhere close to the destructive power of an AR-15, but herein lies the rub. Since necessity is the mother of invention, it is only a matter of time before people bypass the government's restrictions on self-defense with even more destructive weapons. Meanwhile, state governments here are busy writing new regulations on semi-auto firearms, high-capacity magazines, and background checks that infringe on everyone's right to own a firearm for personal and collective self-defense. It is certainly the duty of state and local governments to do what they legally can to ensure the safety of the public. But gun owners view these new restrictions as part of an overall conspiracy to illegally disarm the law-abiding public. Why wouldn't they? On July 10, Governor J.B. Pritzker, Democrat Illinois, flapped his gums on CNN saying, quote, "We need to ban assault weapons, not just in the state of Illinois but nationally." Earlier, on July 6, he made the astounding discovery that, quote, 100% of mass public shootings happen with guns. Duh. In a futile effort to become relevant, the perennial Hollywood laughingstock and morbidly obese Michael Moore recently drafted his proposed constitutional amendment. It would outlaw all semi-automatic firearms, and, I quote, any homemade equipment and machinery that can make a gun or weapon that can take a human life. Close quote. Goodbye lathes, drill presses, files, 3D printers, galvanized pipe, duct tape, hacksaws, and knife sharpeners. Lest anyone forget, the 9/11 hijackers and the Boston Marathon bombers were not affected by useless background checks and didn't need high-capacity magazines. And what about the Beltway snipers in D.C., Maryland, and Virginia? They didn't use so-called assault weapons, only a hunting rifle from inside the trunk of a car. Talk 24 News recently interviewed Ken Paylock, the author of The Ultimate Scorpion's Sting. He told us that the original draft of his novel included a scenario where a terrorist entered a crowded theater. The bad guy used a 2000 psi scuba tank with a gravity-fed hopper and flexible tubing to fire 3,000 ball bearings into the audience within seconds. In another scenario, the terrorist went into a theater with a flamethrower and burned everybody to a crisp. Paylock said he removed these scenes from the published version to not give anyone these ideas. One last point, the politicians and media constantly parrot the term gun violence. But there is no such thing as violent guns any more than there are violent cars or violent knives. These are catchwords to turn the public against firearms possession. The issue is violence, and a heavy focus on guns does not solve the problem. The ugly truth is that politicians don't want violent crime to end. It's how they justify their positions of power. Without a problem to solve, the public would discover these political parasites aren't needed. This explains the irrational defund the police movement, the no bail policy in New York City, and reduced bail in other big cities. A perfect example comes from a report on Fox News. A man in the Houston area of Texas was charged with making threats against Senator Ted Cruz but remains at large after a court let him free on a personal recognizance bond. Thanks for watching Talk 24 News. Be sure to subscribe and hit the notification button to not miss our next report.